All right, welcome to another episode of Together LA's The Listening Tour. And today we have our partner, friend, Larry Acosta, Executive Director and Multi-Ethnic Church Planting Catalyst for City to City, Los Angeles. Larry, welcome.
Hey, it's so good to be with you today, Tommy.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, for those who may not know your story, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, your journey. Love to hear a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's a little bit of a crazy journey. Latino kid, the fourth child of a migrant farm worker in the Central Coast of Southern California. So kind of in the Santa Maria Valley is where I grew up, and into this broken, dysfunctional Mexican household. But God had a plan. And so we weren't a family of faith. But my mom got saved in 1961 at the Billy Graham Crusade in Los Angeles at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of faith coming to our home. But she wasn't allowed to go to church or grow as a Christ follower. And so it was just through her example that she began to kind of, model a loving Christ-like life to her kids. And so that kind of teed it up for me, just watching her life and how she handled kind of my dad and his brokenness and anger and such. But so she kind of laid a foundation of faith for us. But it wasn't until third grade when there's a good news club in my neighborhood, and I came to faith in Christ. These two awesome Anglo ladies had a children's Bible study in our neighborhood, and they're the ones that introduced me to Jesus. They later bridged me to their little Baptist church up the street. And then there was a family in that church who brought me down to LA one time with them to get exposed to Biola University. Had no clue there was even such thing as a Christian university. And so I ended up coming to Biola. While I was at Biola, I worked in South Central Los Angeles. Well, it was called South Central back then. It's South LA now. But I worked with Black and Latino kids just out on the streets, sharing the gospel, teaching a Bible study every Saturday. That shaped a big heart for urban youth. And so that's that early part of my journey. And then my senior year, Tommy, at Biola, I get a job as a youth pastor at a kind of a young church plant in Southern California, not too far away from Biola. And I ended up staying there 12 and a half years as the youth pastor. And that was really formative for me to have to, pour into students, disciple young people, grow something. And so I had a great place to learn and grow. The pastor really believed in me, put me up on Sundays to do the announcements. He really threw me into the deep end of the pool. And I was there 12 and a half years. And so that's kind of where I grew up. That's kind of my early background. And then from there, God called me to start something called Urban Youth Workers Institute and KidWorks. And that was the next 25 years after that church-based ministry was in the nonprofit world, working among training urban leaders and reaching urban youth. So that's it. That's kind of in a nutshell, a little bit of my journey.
And Larry, it looks like when you talk about you founded Urban Youth Workers Institute and KidWorks, what were the two differences between both organizations?
Yeah, great question. So I like to tell people that sometimes when you find the pain in your story, it sometimes shapes a missional calling or purpose that you might have. So here I was, that Latino kid, went to Biola, and at the time while I was working in urban, in an urban context, the school was still pretty much shaped by the dominant culture. And that was a season in history when people of color had to work really hard to assimilate, and there weren't very many people of color to mentor us and to walk with us and coach us through things, right? So that shaped maybe me a little bit. So when I got into that youth ministry role, I was the only person of color on that church staff. And so as a person of color, I had to learn. I had to be a quick study. I had to read the culture of the church and learn how to be successful in that environment. Well, through that, I always wished, man, I wish there was someone that would put their arm on my shoulder and coach me up and walk me through and help me think and read the landscape and be successful at navigating this environment, the culture of this church ministry. I wish there would have been that, but I just had to wake up every day and figure it out by myself. So what that did, Tommy, was it shaped this, a little bit of that pain or that desire shaped a passion and a burden for next gen urban leaders. And so that came out of my story, right? So I remember being on that staff. I remember as the Latino kid, my first staff meeting, I show up like 5 or 7 minutes late to a staff meeting. Well, on Latino time, that's like 15 minutes early, but in a dominant culture setting, I'm late, like I needed to be there 10 minutes early to be on time, well, I was a cultural thing. So of course that first staff meeting, I blew it. And I quickly internalized, like, don't do that again, And so anyway, so urban youth workers came out of, what if someone took the time to identify and develop emerging urban leaders, ethnic leaders, who maybe don't have access to some of the training, some of the development, some of the coaching, or some of the mentorship that they need in order to emerge in a healthier way, in order to ask a question that they might think is dumb, but it's not. They're just trying to get information. They're trying to navigate a new reality. So urban youth workers came out of that. I wished I would have had mentoring in my 20s. I wish someone would have walked with me. I wish someone would have given me the cliff notes and helped me just gain knowledge and expertise in hard and soft skills. I wish someone would have done that. And so God said, that's what I'm calling you to do. I want you to pour into the next generation. And then quickly, the KidWorks part of the story, that's also my story. So I'm the first one in my family to graduate from college. I remember sitting down with my dad, with all the paperwork for filing for financial aid to go to college. And it was so complex. My dad just said, I'm sorry, mijo, I can't help you with this. I don't understand these numbers. I don't understand what this is. And so here I was, that kid who just was that Latino kid trying to do better, trying to do well in school, trying to do something with my life, but the tools weren't there. The access was a little more challenging at that time. And so KidWorks was designed to go into a Latino neighborhood and empower them, and was provided an after school program, but also a faith-based mentorship and discipleship program for reaching kids with the gospel, but also discipling them in the ways of Jesus while holding them accountable and creating a safe place where they could come every afternoon, get help with their homework, and kind of be walked from preschool all the way into college to empower next gen Latinos. And so those were two parts of my story. Remember when I said, look back for some of the pain in your story, what you wished you would have had. And those were the leadership development and that academic development. I wish I would have had that in my earlier years. And so it ended up becoming initially one nonprofit and eventually two nonprofits as those two missions were separated out.
As I talk with you, the first thought I have in my head is, Larry, you're a natural entrepreneur. I mean, you may have a ministry hat, but you're a natural entrepreneur. If we had you start businesses, you would do it well at that too.
Oh man, there were times when all the pressure of fundraising and all of that, all those years, I was like, I wish I were actually making significant money to do all this stuff. But there were a few times I had that, but for the most part, I was, really grateful just to have a kingdom purpose in it. But yeah, thank you though, Tommy. I appreciate that.
Larry, what was it? I mean, you're 25 years working in nonprofit, whether it's with urban youth workers, what was it about the job that you enjoyed? Was it building the organization? Was it implementing a vision? well, probably not fundraising. Was it the networking that you enjoy? What part of it that resonated with who you are and how God has created you to be?
I think initially, Tommy, like in my 20s, if I'm honest, man, I had a big father wound, and so like I never really had my dad's blessing, and because I chose a Christian college to go to, he was not supportive of that, and he never paid a penny of any of my college, so there was part of me, if I'm honest, it came out of that pain, right? I was trying to prove my dad wrong, like, you should have blessed me, man. You were wrong about this kid. And so I think it was to build something to prove my dad wrong. That was mixed in the factor. So I'm sorry for our listening audience that maybe wants it to be a little more of a holy motivation. Man, sometimes our brokenness is part of our story and an emergence, if I'm honest. So that was part of it. So to build something was definitely a driving force. But the healthy side of that story is also I wanted to make a difference. So on the Strengths Finder, belief and responsibility are my top two strengths. And so I think at the core of my being, I wanted to make a difference. I had this fundamental sense of calling that God had a purpose for my life, and I wanted to make a difference and give back to others. I remember one time, quick story. Like I said, we had a broken family system. I remember my dad kind of got drunk and raged on the family. And I remember my mom, to comfort me one day, she just said, "Mijo, someday God is going to use you to make a difference in other people's lives because you're going to understand their pain. You're going to understand their situation, and you're going to be able to help them through that." And so I think that my mom in that moment spoke somewhat prophetically. That was when I was a child. She said that. I didn't even understand what she was talking about. I was just frustrated that our household was so kind of filled with rage. But lo and behold, as I got older, there was some of that, like making a difference in the lives of other Latino families and inspiring young kids, Latino kids, to not be a statistic and go beyond what the stats say about Latino kids and dare to stay in school, dare to dream about what your life could be. And then on the leadership side, man, we need more leaders of color to step in and lead our world forward, lead the church forward, and be bold and healthy. And so that's where the healthy side of those motivations came from. But it's all mixed in because that's all part of our story, the broken side and the healthy side. So,
Larry, as you look back at your life, who are the faces that pop up? Lessons, good or bad? I know your mom, your dad, even the two Anglo ladies at Good News.
Yeah.
Who are the faces that really are markers in your life, chapters who play the central character in different chapters in your life, good or bad?
Yeah, I mean, in that early phase, man, those two, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Standard, they were the two awesome ladies that opened up their home in when I was in third grade, and that was significant right there. Just they believed in me. They taught me, the Bible. I didn't grow up in church, so they taught me the Bible from the jump, and I was learning, and so that was significant in that early childhood phase. And then I would say there was this family at the church, the Nelson family. They were instrumental in believing in me, taking me to camp, taking me to my first college visit. They were the ones that modeled for me what a God-honoring marriage looked like. I didn't live and see that. And so they were instrumental in my high school years, the family as a whole and their son, we were peers. And so that was instrumental. And then I think when I got to college there, I was at Biola, and they were very missionally focused. And by being challenged to have a weekly outreach ministry responsibility to give back to the community, I think that was that missional expectation that was part of following Christ. Having that understanding, I think in those college years, that was super instrumental. I would wake up on Saturdays and rally a few guys, and we'd go down to South LA. I could barely afford the gas to get down there. But that shaped a missional heart in me. So all along the way, there were different factors that God used. And I will say, in fairness to my dad later had a janitor business, and he was somewhat entrepreneurial. We were a poor family, but there were times he would trust me to handle different jobs and to lead the crew as a teenager. And so there was some form of empowerment for the family business. And I think later that paid dividends in youth ministry. Like it didn't scare me that when I first took that youth ministry, there were probably 12 kids and only 4 were really interested in Jesus, and it didn't scare me to try to take that on and grow that to something significant. And so that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, in fairness, to give my dad some props, I think that was modeled by him as well. And he helped shape that by forcing me to lead at a young age.
Larry, I asked you that because I look back, all of us have different chapters in our life that are very, very unique. And I look back at my journey. My parents immigrated in 72. I was born in 77, but we grew up in a very poor family. I never understood why my parents for dinner always wanted ramen, lettuce, and hot dog. I understand that now very well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. Yeah, I remember in a similar way, I didn't realize we were poor. And then I came home one day from school in the afternoon, and in Mexican culture, and every culture has its soul food, right? So I come home and there was this cow tongue that had already been cooked in the oven, and it was sitting on the stove and it was cooling down, right? And I always remember when my mom would make tacos, man, it was already chopped up and all put together in a taco. I don't remember seeing the tongue just sitting there cooling, and that's when the light went on, like, oh dang, I think we're poor people, man. like the light went on. I went like, oh, I get it now. I see how this is.
Yeah. Now, and I love talking about journey, and I think a lot of times this is what the listening tour is. And as I talk with leaders, all of that, who you are, has shaped you into the person. It's what my seminary professor says to me. He says, too many leaders are always looking ahead. Tommy, if you do not stop and reflect upon what God has done in your life and the lessons, you are doing yourself a disservice. Out of all of those lessons, all the way from the Nelson family, the 2 Anglo ladies, your parents, even your youth pastor in the church who gave you an opportunity to do different things, as you look back, how did it shape you into the person you are today?
Well, I think a lot of it came from, seeing a need and having a vision for how I could maybe contribute to, making things better and moving things forward. So when I was in high school, here I am at this little Baptist church, and we actually didn't have a youth pastor. We had these adults who were kind of advisors and overseers, volunteers. And I remember honestly looking around and going, man, there are a lot of teens at this church, and the youth ministry isn't really that dynamic. And certainly as a kid who didn't grow up in church, I remember thinking, I mean, I like it here. These are really nice people, but I would never bring my unchurched friends here. This is kind of a little bit hokey, and but I love the people, right? And so I saw that need and then jumped in. And so here it was our junior year in high school. Paul Nelson and I and the whole group, we go to this place called Hume Lake in the Sierras, and I just feel this call to ministry. I didn't even know that was a thing. We come back. He teaches the first week of Bible study because, again, instead of the adults leading it, now it's becoming student-led, right? So he teaches the first week. I teach the second week. We go back and forth. We're juniors in high school. This youth ministry doubles in about 3 weeks. And that's when God kind of confirmed a call to my life and a call to ministry specifically. He's pastoring in San Diego County, and I've been pastoring all these years. So God confirmed a call by seeing the need. So I guess that's to your question. Sometimes it's people and mentorship. Sometimes it's just by seeing the need and the opportunity and then stepping into it and activating on it. If God's given you that kind of entrepreneurial or bold personality to kind of jump in and do something about it and make it better, I guess.
And would you say that importance of youth ministry as well too? I look back as I hear you, and what I'm doing at Resource Global and Together LA and all the stuff that I'm doing is I spent 18 years doing college ministry and high school ministry as a volunteer. And we were able to grow our college ministry to 90 students, 120 students at high school, but it was learning how to grow it, work with student leaders, work with volunteers.
Yeah.
And I worked through all my kinks and all my mistakes during those 18 years of youth ministry.
Yeah, it's a powerful time to grow and learn leadership development. But I will say that if you can have mentorship during that season, it can really keep you from doing something, kind of out of bounds or what have you. But it is a great time because you're bold and idealistic and driven and just trying to leave your mark. It is a great season. But I will say that that's what kind of motivated me to start pouring into next gen urban leaders, because I just knew if we could give them some of the hard skills and soft skills sooner in their 20s, they could really maximize their calling. We could accelerate their growth so they could maximize their calling. And so I still believe strongly in training, but I love the zeal that 20 and 30 somethings have just to change the world. So we just gotta fuel that through training and resources and encouragement and mentorship to maximize it.
Yeah. Hey, talk to me about City of Los Angeles. What made you transition from your organization that you started 2 organizations to what you're doing now with City?
Yeah, so we were coming up on a 25-year milestone within that organization as a founder, and it just went, as it was 2 years away, I was just thinking, man, it would be pretty cool to do a succession plan at the 25th year, pass this off to younger leadership, and then trust God for the what's next. And so that's what we did. We did a succession plan with one of the really sharp young leaders that had come up through the ranks at Urban Youth Workers Institute. And he took over that organization, and that freed me up. And around that time, I was just trusting God to show me what was next. And that's when I had a meeting with Al Barth. And so Al and I began to talk about City to City and what God was doing, and in growing and expanding the kingdom through the City to City organization. So we had a great conversation, and it was over maybe a few months, right? But what I'm most excited about is as I look at reaching millennials and Gen Zers and beyond, I really think that some of these young, dynamic, urban leaders and pastors that I've been pouring into, some of them are called to actually plant healthy, dynamic, externally focused, gospel-centered churches in the cities of America. And specifically for me, I just saw this alignment, Tommy, with what I have been doing in training next-gen urban leaders, and then the need to complete the Great Commission. We need more ethnic-led, multi-ethnic churches to be planted in order to complete the Great Commission, in order to take the gospel to the margins, in order to reach some of our young emerging ethnic families and communities that desperately need a healthy, God-honoring church. And so even in this time when we're looking at some of the civil unrest in our cities, Tommy, and I think, and I look at the populations, just, kids and young adults on TV, and I think, if they were ever to be reached with the gospel, where would they go to church? What place would speak their language? What place would look like them when they cross that threshold into a building, if they chose to, right? And I think, man, we need more ethnic-led, multi-ethnic churches where they, if they choose to come to church and engage the gospel there or outside the church, at least they need to see they need to see something that reflects how they see the world. They need to see diversity. They need to see empowerment of ethnic leaders on the stage, communicating, leading worship, leading small groups, all throughout. And so it just seemed like a God thing to call me to. He called me to align what I have been doing and take it to the next level, and now develop these next gen ethnic pastors to plant churches here in the future.
But Larry, as we were talking to before we start recording, that means you're starting to build the organization from scratch, building up with your team, or even something simple as AV, sending things up. You got to build a whole team doing this.
Yeah, it's definitely lean and mean as a team. I think I'm so appreciative of Al and the City to City team, because they let me build it in a little bit different way than was their model, if you will. And so what I did, Tommy, instead of just taking what was given, I took a few things from my mentorship kind of strategies that I had been using with youth workers, and now I just invited some potential church planters. So what I did is, if you like baseball, I kind of tried hard to build a AA farm team. And so this whole year, I just started last fall. So this whole year, I've been pouring into just over 60 young pastors and leaders all throughout the Southern California region. I have 5 groups. We meet once a month. We read a book a month on character formation, spiritual formation. We spend about 5 hours together each time we meet. And that's my AA farm team. So I'm walking with them. I'm pouring into them. I'm developing them. And I'm also vetting them. And so a subset of those 60 plus leaders will be invited into our church planting school. And in City to City language, that's called an incubator. And so this fall, we hope to have 25 to 30 of those AA players be invited to our AAA team, and that's our incubator, our church planting school. And so I'm so grateful that City to City allowed me to use some of my entrepreneurial skills to tweak the model to still get the mission done. And so they're kind of watching to see how this accelerates maybe the growth of leaders and helps to build a pipeline of young church planters here in the region. So this October we'll do our the first church planting school or incubator that I've been a part of.
Yeah.
And so we'll have like 25 or 30 young church planters in that. And then so in 2021, I'm excited to help them be successful at growing their core team and then raising the money and launching out to plant their church. And then I'll have the challenge of trying to refill and reload that pipeline, if you will, and get some new people into the learning communities and kind of keep that going here in Southern California. So it's an exciting challenge, and a challenge nonetheless, but one that I feel God shaped me for.
Very, very nice. Hey, last question. We've dealt with COVID-19, are still in the midst of it. You're seeing the civil unrest going on in the U.S. and Los Angeles. What are you learning personally from all of this? What are some personal reflections that you're learning as we wrap this up?
Tommy, I'm learning that even though I'm Latino and a person of color, I'm still learning to have a posture of listening and hearing from my African American brothers and sisters and stepping into their pain. So I'm trying to hear them, and I'm trying to be present in their pain and hear it at a new level. And so I think that's one of a couple of the things I'm trying to do. And then I think whenever our skin tone is lighter, I think it means that we've been given different opportunities and privileges that we might not realize. So even though I grew up poor, the fact that as a Latino, my skin's lighter, and because I have an education or things like that, maybe I haven't experienced some of the profiling, some of the challenges that others have experienced. And I don't want to discount their pain. I don't want to discount their story, their journey. I need to be present with them, and I need to demonstrate compassion. And so I just want to stay in it. I want to keep being a learner. I made our learning communities read a book on race last month, and we had some incredible dialogues. Guys were sharing their pain and their emergence, because 95% of the guys in these groups are young men of color. And so we had some powerful conversations. And so I need to stay present in that. And we need to grow that cultural competency skill. Well, no matter who you are along the spectrum, whatever your background is, we all can become more culturally competent and aware. And so we have to read, and we have to grow and be teachable. So those are some of the things I'm learning.
And everyone, this is Larry Acosta, Executive Director and Multi-Ethnic Church Planting Catalyst for City to City Los Angeles. So Larry, thank you for your story. I actually wanted, and we could talk about City to City in the future. I wanted the audience to hear about your journey and get to hear about your past and how you are who you are because of that past. So thank you so much, Larry.
Hey, it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much, Tommy, for the opportunity.
For more information, go to togetherla.net, and on Instagram, we are together_LA. Thank you, Larry, and we'll talk soon.